weekends. So I've got to make sure that's cut off in the future. So that, I mean, I had to get all the way out, finally get all the way back in.
Yeah.
YouTube is starting.
All right, we're streaming live. Okay. And is Miss Lydia gonna run the host the show today? Okay. Okay, it's 3:30. You want to go ahead and make us live or take us live? All right, we're now broadcasting. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our Tuesday, August the 4th agenda session. I now call this meeting to order. To have approval of the minutes, please.
So moved.
Okay. We have a proper second and we had a motion and a proper second. Minutes will stand as recorded. Under resolutions 7A, Madam Clerk, would you read that, please?
A resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a first amendment to birthing agreement in substantially the form attached with the Reinert Group LLC with insurance limits not less than $3 million in a single occurrence.
All right. Any questions or concerns on this item for tonight? All minds are clear. I see no hands. 7B, please.
A resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a conservation services agreement 2020 to 2021 with the Trust for Public Land and substantially the form attached for a term of 1 year from July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021 for an amount not to exceed $100,000 to be paid in 4 quarterly installments of $25,000.
Okay. Questions or comments? 7C, please.
A resolution authorizing the mayor's reappointment of Dan Mayfield to the Bureau and Record Board representing District 4 with a term expiration of July 31st, 2023.
Councilman Ledford?
I'm good. That's a 3-year appointment.
All right, sir. 7D, please.
A resolution authorizing the chief of police to renew the city's existing agreement with Data Driven LLC for 1 year, providing Watson products in support of Chattanooga Police Department operations beginning July 1st, 2020 and ending June 30th, 2021, with an annual spend limit not to exceed $90,000.
Okay. Questions or concerns? I see no hands concerning this item. We have no departmental report tonight. Council, if you would pull up your purchasing items and see if there are any questions on tonight's purchases. Looks like there's about 3 purchases for tonight's consideration. Any questions at this time?
Sir?
I'm sorry?
No, not at all, sir.
No? Okay.
Nope.
I thought I heard somebody.
Mm-mm.
Okay. All right, if you would pull up your August the 11th agenda. And let's go over that. Vice Chair, what was it, item F on next week's agenda that we needed to move?
Was
6F, the
Form-based
form-based code. I think Mr. Bridger was going to be absent next week
I believe that is correct, sir.
and
Yes.
requested that item to be moved. Mr. Attorney, since that's
Yes.
on the 2-week agenda, can't we just go ahead and bump that?
Yes, sir. You want to move it off the same 1 week or not? I didn't know when Mr. Bridger might be back. I thought towards the end of the month, he said he would be back.
I believe it was like around the 25th. I think we were going to move it to the 25th. Could
Yes.
your office just go ahead and reschedule that for the 25th, please?
Yes, sir. Do it.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, that item's in planning and zoning today as well.
I guess it would be, sir. Okay. Any other questions or concerns about the August the 11th agenda? Anything on the 2-week? Okay, if not, You do have your 3-week or items for future consideration as well in your folder. A couple of items on that. Economic, community development, IT, and then Councilman Mitchell, will we be going over these items in in Public Works Committee today? Items of future considerations?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I see no hands for future considerations. We do have Planning and Zoning Committee today, as well as Public Works. Is there anything else that needs to come before the council at this time before I turn the floor over to Councilman Ledford for Planning and Zoning? Okay, I see none. Councilman Ledford, I'll now turn the floor over to you for Planning and Zoning, sir.
Thank you, Chairman, and I would like to welcome everybody to Planning and Zoning. And if I can get a motion to approve the minutes, or if no objection, they will stand. Minutes will stand. Mr. Bridger, are you online today? If we can bring him in, please.
Yes, sir. He's on his way.
Thank you.
So am I the right person this time?
You are Karen Hunt. Yes, very good to see you.
Okay.
John, here we go. We've got a relatively short case compared to some we've had in the past few months on our agenda today. So we're going to kick this off with items for next week, ordinances on first reading. If you will launch into 6A, please.
I'll be glad to. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let me see if I can maximize this window in a second. There we go. So this first request is to rezone a piece of property from RT1 residential townhouse zone to R3 residential zone for a multifamily development of 96 units on 5.6 acres. This property is located in the 6400 block of Shalford Road, right across the Veterans Clinic that's being built on the site across the street to the north. Again, if you look at the zoning of the area, you do have R3 abutting this property to the west. You have R4 to the north. You have R1 zoning to the east and south. This property in particular was rezoned from R1 to RT1 with the condition of limiting to a maximum of 45 units. Staff have recommended to denial. It was, however, approved with conditions by City Council. Then you see the adjacent property was later rezoned to R3, subject to several conditions. So we had that apartment development to the west. And then, of course, the clinic that was rezoned a couple of years ago to R4 with some conditions to accommodate the development of that clinic to the north. And there was a rezoning request adjacent to this property that was denied for C5 for a pharmacy. So again, look at the land use. You get single family, as I noted, to the east and south. You got multifamily to the west. And again, the main thought is how do you handle transition? You know, when staff looked at this request, based on the recommendations of the adopted Shalford Road Lee Highway Plan, it recommended low density residential. We saw this tract of land as kind of like a transition from that apartment development to the west, to the single family to the east. So we recommend to deny. However, I do understand that the applicant, working with the council representative, met with the residents on several occasions to come up with some appropriate conditions to accommodate more units on this property, but subject, again, to some conditions to ensure compatibility. So there was no opposition at Planning Commission. And after hearing the applicant's presentation, the staff's recommendation, and the conditions that I think were presented by the applicant, Planning Commission recommended to approve with these following conditions, which are 5. One, that all buildings shall be set back at a minimum of 40 feet from all exterior boundaries, which adjoin that R1 residential property. All parking areas that are paved shall be no closer than 25 feet from any R1 zone property. There's also conditions relating to location of your dumpster. Also requirement for a 5-foot tall vinyl coated chain link fence for screening. And then there are some limits at number 5 on the maximum height of buildings. So it comes with you, the recommendation to deny from staff, but approve from Planning Commission after the public hearing.
Very good. John, I'm seeing no hands, but I would like to allow Dr. Vers, if she has a
Sure.
comment.
Yeah, you were just getting ready to see a hand. So let me say that the applicant and the neighborhood, we held one meeting before everything got shut down, and then the neighborhood has been really included in everything. They're for it. The only thing that I'm unclear on, John, is that 5-foot tall vinyl chain link.
Yes.
That was not what the neighborhood had agreed to.
Okay.
And I'm not sure how that got there. It was not a chain link. It was something that would really block the view of the area, and it was solid, but whether it's vinyl.
Maybe it'd be a vinyl solid fence is what you're thinking as far as like. but
And
not chain link.
higher. They wanted blocking.
Okay.
So that was the only thing I was a little concerned about. Mike Price is the one that's helping them, and I thought we had come up with something a little better looking than some chain link fence. It was for blocking, and I'm not sure how that got changed.
I'll follow with the applicant on that before next. How about I'll copy you on an email so we got closure by next week.
Yeah, because I think the neighbors did not know that this was going to be 5 feet. They wanted a little taller and not chain link, something solid. So if you could get that cleared up, that would be great.
I will do.
Thank you.
John,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. I do remember that conversation as well. So John, if you'll loop me in on that, that'd be
I'll be
great.
happy to copy as well.
Yep, thank you. All right, no further questions. I don't see any hands on that item. John, you want to take us down to item B?
Sure. This is a request to rezone. This is actually deferred from a prior council meeting. I think the applicant had requested a deferral. So I'll just give you a quick highlight in case you want to, unless you want a full presentation, because we presented this a month ago. This is a rezone from M1 manufacturing to UGC commercial for an office development. This is off of, again, South Broad, which is just south of the Chattanooga Creek. And again, they're just wanting to rezone it to UGC to accommodate an office development. Councilman Oglesby, I don't know if you had any updates on this. I mean, I'd be happy to finish the whole presentation, but I didn't want to go through it again unless you all think it's necessary.
No, actually, I spoke with them this morning, and they are ready to move forward with it next week. So I'm good, unless
Okay,
some of my
staff-
colleagues want to look at it.
Staff and PC recommend approval, so.
Yeah.
Very good. I appreciate that efficiency, Councilman Oglesby.
Thank you, Councilman Ledford.
All right, John, you want to take us to item C, please?
Yes, sir. This is a request. This is in Highland Park community to rezone from R1 residential zone to RTZ residential townhouse 0 lot line zone for a proposed single family development. Basically, they're taking this lot, will be converting it to 2 lots, each with an individual structure on each lot. You see the noted density there. I'm going to come back to this when we talk about the RTZ zone changes, but their current density for this development, when if approved, will be still be 12.5 dwelling units per acre. This shows you the location of this property in Highland Park. It's at the intersection of South Holly and 14th Street. So it's just 1 block north of Main Street. This shows you the zoning of the area. You see there are some RTZ zones surrounding and different parts of a block away from this property, but the immediate zoning around this property is R1. There was a request in 2019 to rezone from R1 to RTZ. That was later withdrawn. PC recommended to approve, staff had recommended to deny. And the main reason for that was the orientation of the lot was not appropriate for that block. Then in 2019, you see not too far from this property, we did recommend approval from R1 to RTZ with conditions being single family detached, single parking access to the rear, and then no more than 2 lots on that property. 2017 had again a similar request, similar conditions. It was approved with a limit to 2 lots, parking in the rear, and develop a single family residential only. So again, you'll see this pattern why folks are requesting the RTZ is it gives you that flexibility on your lot widths. R1 has a minimum lot width of 60 feet and a minimum lot size of 7,500 square feet, which as folks are developing on these smaller lots, it doesn't work for an urban infill type development. RTZ gives you some flexibility in having a smaller lot width. You can see here it's down to 25 feet minimum lot width, smaller setbacks, but it has a density cap of 12 DU per acre. And it also, of course, allows townhouses in addition to single family detached. So again, look at the surrounding land use. It's predominantly single family detached residential. The recently adopted Historic River Ridge Plan recommends urban residential for this block. So this is one of those blocks where it not only supports single family, but you could do actually multi-unit up to 4 units per lot on that block. So again, based on that, staff recommend to approve, but being consistent with this other RTZ zone request, limited to single family dwellings only. There was no opposition at Planning Commission. Planning Commission concurred with staff's recommendation to approve with that condition.
Very good. I think Councilman Byrd is awful. Oh, are you there? Yeah, I see him now. Councilman Byrd, do you have anything you want to add, sir?
No, I gotta talk to some more people concerning this. But yeah, it's kind of sticky situation.
Sure. Let me ask you this. Do you think you'll be ready for next Tuesday?
I definitely will be ready for next Tuesday.
Okay, very good. That was the most important question I had for you, sir.
Yes, definitely be ready for next Tuesday. Thank you, bro.
Yes, sir. All right, John, let's move on to item D, please.
Sure. This is a request to lift a condition. This is in the UTC campus area. This property is currently zoned C3 with a number of conditions, and is request to lift the condition requiring that dumpsters and mechanical equipment be placed to the rear of the property and screened from rights of way. Okay. You can see the site here located off of Douglas Street between 8th and MLK Boulevard. So again, if you look at the zoning as indicated before, most of this area is zone C3. And all this area was rezoned to C3 back in 2002 with a set of conditions to promote good basic urban form and design. And one was that dumpsters and mechanical equipment shall be placed to the rear of the property and screened from all public rights of way. Again, if you look at the surrounding land use, you see you have mostly multi-unit residential buildings close to the street, parking to the side or the rear. You see the building and construction right there in yellow. So, in reviewing this request, of course, we consulted the downtown plan as well. And the down plan also noted that it was important that equipment and service areas can detract from that visual quality of the urban experience. And so you try to put those in the rear where you can and screen them from public rights of way. As I understand, I think the building is already up. And so now they're facing a situation about the dumpster. So staff, and looking at the request, we didn't feel like it was appropriate to just eliminate that condition entirely, because dumpsters, if they're not screened, would not be appropriate along the right of way. And so we basically recommended approval with basically a modification that would require that dumpster to be screened with a minimum 6 feet in height and no less than 12 inches taller than the equipment. You can see all 4 sides that would be screened, and it should be consist of some kind of solid fence structure or gate, no chain link. So that's what staff's recommendation was. At Planning Commission, there was no opposition. And after hearing from the applicant and staff, Planning Commission concurred with staff's recommendation to deny the request to just remove and basically approve an amended condition, which I've just provided an overview of.
Very good. Councilman Byrd, I know
Yes.
you want to weigh in on this.
Of course. Let me ask you this right here, John. How will the dumpster, how would it get dumped? Would they use the city street to load and unload the dumpster? How would that work?
I would think so. I could ask the applicant to clarify, but that would be my understanding.
Okay, and how do you feel about, does this set a precedence? Because before this, they knew of the rules of how
Right.
things worked, and things went forward anyway. How do you propose
To your point, yeah, it does set a precedent for allowing somebody potentially to do it in the front. I mean, subject to being screened. Yes. So you got to think about that as well as part of your review. Do you want to set that precedent for this block?
Gotcha. All right, thank you, John.
Yep.
Great. Thank you. Councilman Byrd, let me ask you this question, because I know this one's been circulating around a little bit conversation wise. Will you think you'll be ready for this one next week?
Yes, I do. Yes, definitely be ready next week.
I have no doubt you will, sir. Thank you.
So you want me to shoot an email just to ask the applicant to be prepared to clarify for the record, I guess, how that dumpster would be serviced?
Right, because I don't want to also, if that's going to be to me, I think another issue with holding up traffic or stopping the street if it has to be loaded and unloaded from the street. How does
Right.
that look, and what kind of disadvantage that put, pedestrians and people in by it being loaded from the city streets? I just want to know how that's going to look.
Okay, I'll shoot that out.
Thank you, sir.
Very good. All right, thank you, Councilman Byrd. John, we have, that's the end of our cases for,
Mr. Chair, I got a hand
yes,
up.
sir.
I got a hand up.
I'm sorry, I'm juggling that screen, so go ahead, Councilman Mitchell.
When you're shooting emails, will you please put in there something about why he didn't build the conditions to begin with?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Mitchell. All right,
We'll do
John.
that.
Thank you, John. Okay, now, John, we have two ordinance amendments we want to discuss, E
Sure.
and F. You'll walk us through those, and then we'll drop on down to a planning resolution.
The first one I hope is a little bit, hopefully it won't take too long. It's the amendment to the RTZ zone. As you saw, we've had several cases for RTZ in these urban areas. But what we're running up against is a challenge with the existing RTZ zone standards. There's a cap of 12 dwelling units per acre. And depending on what size lot you're using for your house, that may or may not work. So we are, as you know, and we mentioned this with the Area 3 plan adoption, that we're working on some new urban zone tools, but it's going to probably take a minute, for those to be ready, probably not to the end of the year. So in the meantime, we need to be able to, I guess, to have this tool to use RTZ for these small lot residential developments. But in making that change, we want to make it apply to future rezonings, not currently zoned property. So you follow me? Because we have other RTZ zones in the urban overlay that clearly were zoned with an expectation it was going to be developed a certain way. And so as people apply to rezone, we want to be sure whatever changes we make to the RTZ would only apply to basically future zoning cases going forward. So what we've developed here is, I'll call it kind of an interim solution until we get these new urban zones that basically would limit these modifications to just the urban overlay. And just as a reminder, the urban overlay is, think of river to ridge. It's Missionary Ridge over to the base of Lookout Mountain from Georgia state line to the North Shore. So it would only apply geographically to that area. And again, for new zoning cases, so not if you've got existing RTZ zone property, these changes would not apply to that. Because we want to make sure there's an opportunity for council review on a case-by-case basis, for future requests. We would replace the density cap of 12 dwellings per acre with a minimum lot size, similar to what we've done with form-based code in our RA zone. It would allow up to 4 dwelling units per lot. And again, these changes would only apply to future rezoning requests. And this just gives us a tool that we can use until we get these new urban residential zones finalized. So I'll pause there. I know that's a lot of information, so make sure you guys understand what I'm saying, and I'd be happy to explain more.
Very good. Thank you, John. I do have Councilman Mitchell. I do see your hand, sir.
Thank you, sir. John, can you go back to the map, the urban overlay map?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that map's incorrect on the North Shore.
So, well, as far as the urban overlay, this is what's in the ordinance.
Yeah, that map, if that's in the ordinance, is incorrect on the North Shore.
And in what sense? Make sure I'm following you.
Well, the sense that if you go out Hickson Pike,
Yeah.
and you see how it bleeds over to the right up to the hill.
Oh, you're talking about that little area.
Yeah, that was taken out of the urban overlay zone years ago.
Well, you know what we need to do? I pulled this off of Municode. So note to our city attorney, Phil, you and I need to double check that, make sure that map was modified.
See, Phil's trying to weigh in here. Phil?
Yeah, the only thing I was going to weigh in on, yes, if we have a map that is incorrect that needs to be amended, yes, we need to do that, John. We will work on that. The other question I was going to suggest on here, John, is that if it's applying to future rezonings only, that we have the effective date of the ordinance in the ordinance here, and any ordinance after that
Yeah.
effective date it would apply to.
It
So we
should
gotta
be
make
in there, but I'll double check the language because we discussed that, I think, after that planning commission about putting that language, but I'll confirm it.
Yeah, we need to have a specific date that it applies to properties that are rezoned after that date.
Got it.
Okay.
That was one of my questions. Councilman Mitchell, thank you. You get the gold star today.
He worked hard on that map.
We will find it.
Chairman Henderson, I see your hand, but I see your mic muted.
Yes, sir. I was just waiting for you to call on me.
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
John, so with the screen that we have in front of us right now.
Yes, sir.
Tell me how these four things are different from the way it is right now. I mean, so a lot allows up to 4 dwellings per lot. Is that?
Right now, you can only have one structure per lot in RTZ period. So in RTZ, I would say the biggest change is going from like one structure per lot to no more than four units on a lot. And again, this would be for new requests. So this would not apply to currently zoned property. So that's how I call that lower end of missing middle housing, where you give folks who like do a cottage, court development, that kind of thing. So you allow you to up to 4 dwelling units per lot. It basically, the other change is it would replace that density cap of 12 dwelling units per acre with a, and here this kind of shows you some more of the standards. If you can see on the screen, you see RTZ currently, I don't know how that happened, has a density of 12 units per acre. That would go away. And we would use the lot sizes that are similar to ERA. You can see, which is basically about 4.5 DU per acre, but it has a 3,000 square foot minimum lot size. And again, this would only apply to the urban overlay.
Okay.
I can see the wheels turning, Chairman.
Yeah, if you have questions or concerns, that's why, again, this would only apply if you're applying to rezone property. Any existing RTZ zone properties, this would not apply to.
So John, maybe
could you apply to rezone your RTZ property?
Yeah, but you have to go like anything to it has to go to the planning commission, like any zoning case, right? It has to go to.
Okay.
John, let me go to Councilman Gilbert if the chairman is
go ahead.
Okay with his, thank you. And then maybe you could give us an example of what this tool solves in a real life scenario. Councilman Gilbert. You're muted, sir. All right, we're going to come back to Councilman Gilbert. I can't see his screen right now. So, John, give us a quick Cliff Notes version of a sample of why you need this, what will come up against, what this solves. Give us a real life.
I'll give you a couple
scenario.
Remember, there's some recent, if you look at some of the recent cases in the past 2 or 3 months, remember seeing a request for UGC in Highland Park for a 4-unit. So we're zoning the inside of neighborhoods to UGC because we don't have a low-end multi-unit residential zone. Well, I would rather see an RTZ zone, right, in an urban block than UGC, which is really meant for a commercial street in the middle of a neighborhood. So that's one problem. I would say the other is UGC does not allow single family or 2 units.
Right.
So the only way you can build on small lot residential. Remember when Ethan Collier for his development there in in Oak Grove applied for C3, and part of that was because we don't have a zone that lets you have small lot single family residential that's less than 12 units per acre, or more than, I should say, more than 12 units per acre. So again, all this does is give us a zoning tool for somebody who wants to rezone their property to do this kind of development, because this is, again, meeting some of the housing needs in the area to have a smaller lot infill.
Okay, now talk to me real quick about the type. You mentioned the cottage style homes that we're starting to see come through.
Yep.
And that's relatively new concept to Chattanooga.
It is right. It's kind of new in the scene. It's more frequent already in other cities, but we've had a couple. C&E did one off of Dodds Avenue, not Willow, off of Willow
Willow.
Street in Ridgedale.
Mhm.
And I think for that one, they had to do R3MD to make that work. So we're trying to come up with again, this is something at least to give us something for requests that come through between now and the end of the year, until we get a better zone tool in place. We need something that we can work with. Otherwise, you have to go through a variance process. And as Phil will tell you, he doesn't like that. Variances are really supposed to be for a hardship, not a self-imposed hardship. And that puts the Board of Zoning Appeals in a bad position.
Yes, I would not bring a self-imposed hardship to BOZA.
And if you recall the case we just approved, or I think I said didn't approve, we briefed you on the one in Highland Park for RTZ, she would need a variance.
Correct. John, I do see. Councilman Gilbert, are you ready now?
Yes, sir.
Let me call on you, and can I ask the city attorney if that hand is still good, or I need to take?
It was still good only insofar as I did found the ordinance amending that Councilman Mitchell was referring to. And John, it's ordinance number 12957 in 2015 that reduced the boundary of the urban overlay zone.
Okay. So we'll get that corrected. Yeah, Brian already texted me on my phone.
Okay, good.
Very good.
He's aware of it. He's watching.
You're not going to get much past Councilman Mitchell, that's for sure.
That's right.
Councilman Gilbert, please. Sorry.
John, do you have a map showing suburban versus urban? Because I know we had discussion before.
Right.
But it's saying this so people would know where they stand when it comes to development.
Right. Well, this would be, again, that would, as far as this ordinance, it would only apply to the areas designated in this map with the one change noted by Councilman Mitchell for the area right here. This needs to be taken out right here. But this is something that's already in the zoning code. It just kind of lets us know that part of the city where you tend to have what I call more urban development patterns. That's where you got your grid. So if you look at your district up in this area over here is outside of that. This includes, you can see that's Wilder Street and Dodson and East I'm trying to say Glass Street area. So it's kind of where you got the grid is where this applies. So again, this only creates the option when you're applying to rezone your property. And as you know, as council, and we've already done that with some cases, you can still limit even further to single family only, right? We just had a case where the staff and PC have recommended approval subject to single family detached only. So just because you have this tool doesn't mean you entitle all the things in that toolbox. There's a legislative process to amend that, to request a rezone, and then you as council can always choose to make it even more restrictive.
Okay. All right. Appreciate it.
You good, Councilman?
Yes.
Very good. Let me scroll through here, get that hand down. I'm not seeing any other hands. Chairman, I see your wheels turning a little bit while we were talking. Do you want to chime back in?
No, sir. I'll wait.
Okay. Thank
And
you.
by the way, feel free to shoot me an email. I'll be here through end of the day Thursday. Brian Schultz will be here next week for this. So, but if you do have questions, if you don't mind, forward them to me, and we'll try to get you a response before I get out of town.
So John, let me ask you this before we move on to item F. Is this a time-sensitive issue that you're trying to beat the clock on something?
Not. I mean, if we needed to wait till when I get back, that's fine.
Because I'm sensing some questions out there,
If-
I think lingering.
So if we have,
trying-
I'd be happy to address it when I get back. And we can put this on the 25th too, if you wanted to.
Okay, if you think that, I'm feeling pretty comfortable. I'd like to ask and I'll ask at the end of the meeting, kind of take the temperature of the council on that, those two amendments. I know we're going to move item F. So speaking of F, do you want to go ahead and take us down that path?
Yes, sir. Let me pull that up. So what I'm going to do, just so you know, I got in front of me, you see, I'm going to kind of give you an overview, but I've also got the actual ordinance. So if we need to do a deep dive on the overview, I can jump to it. So I thought I'd do is kind of start with the overview. And then if you want me to do a deeper dive, I've got the details right behind it. So as you know, as part of our annual review process, we took a comprehensive look at the form-based code and have basically 26 amendments, I believe, proposed after Planning Commission's review. So let me go to, again, full screen mode here. So I'm just going to kind of give you a overview of the changes that are in the ordinance. The first one reduces the minimum transparency from 25 to 20% for your upper stories. As you remember, there was we had some concerns with folks who are doing residential type development on the upper stories that really doing 25% was not going to work. And we originally proposed a staff variance option, but based on feedback from council, you asked for us to really make it more of a code change and not have so much on staff to make those decisions. So we reduced it from 25 to 20%. Again, that's for your windows, on the facade. So I'm gonna pause there. Is there any questions on that change?
I'm not seeing any hands, John.
Okay, so I'm gonna keep going. If anybody has a question, just kind of raise
You
your
keep
hand.
going and I'll scan for hands.
Sure. Okay. The second change deals with parking setbacks. And one of the issues we ran up against, if you're doing particularly like a townhouse type development, or single family that's close to the street, and you are rear parking your inside the building, there's a parking setback that runs from the front right of way. And it was basically creating a conflict of you actually getting rear parking into the back of your building because it was conflicting with that 30-foot minimum parking setback in the front. So all we did is exempted single family detached and attached dwellings from that 30-foot parking setback in the front. The third deals with what we call a building articulation requirement. And if you can imagine, if you're sitting on a street and you're looking along that street wall, along the edge of the street, it basically says every so many feet, you got to have a change in that vertical plane. So it's not just one flat wall. The feedback we got from a lot of architects who do building design downtown felt like that was over micromanagement of urban design and not needed. After talking with staff, we agree, and so we just recommend removing that requirement. Because if you've already got the building on the front, we don't need to dictate exactly how that front is designed. The fourth change deals with the minimum ground floor elevation. And think of this as the floor plate of a residential structure. And I don't know if you noticed now that there are some new housing units being built that are actually at grade. And the purpose of this, in some cases, it's just customer preference that like that style, but also for seniors who don't want to have to navigate a wheelchair ramp to get to their home, would like to have that flexibility to build residential structures at the ground floor elevation. And so this just removes that minimum ground floor requirement for the RD and RA zones. Okay.
Yep, keep going.
The fifth item is building heights. And this deals with, we have in our form-based code, we have a maximum number of stories and a corresponding height for those stories. So for 5 stories, it could be X number of feet. For 6 stories, X number of feet. What we discovered, again, talking with architects, folks who do these multi-story developments, is that depending on how you construct the building, particularly if you got residential on top, the maximum heights may conflict when you try to get your HVAC units and all that combined. So again, instead of having to go to the form-based code committee to get a variance every time, what we recommended doing is just increasing the maximum heights by 10 feet for each of those. So for the 3-story, there's a 10 feet add-on. For the 4 and on up the line. So we're again trying to create more efficiency in the process. Okay, and by the way, that only it applies to commercial areas, not residential. So just so y'all know about that. The 6th item deals with landscaping. We heard a lot. I'll say this is probably the most frequently cited kind of concern we heard from folks doing development in around the downtown area, is that when you're doing those small to moderate size infill redevelopment projects, the interior landscaping requirements, not the periphery, but the inside, the individual landscape islands was causing conflicts with them meeting their own parking requirements as it relates for their tenants. And so what we suggested doing there is just increase the minimum threshold, which was at 10 spaces to 20. So if you got a lot that's 20 spaces or less, you do not have to do any interior landscaping. You still have to do the periphery, but you don't have to do any interior landscaping for those smaller parking lots. So those larger parking lots, you would still do interior landscaping, just those smaller to mid-size, you would not. Item number 7 is fencing. And just all we're doing there is adding the option for wood fences. It was not covered or addressed in the form-based code, and this gives more flexibility, particularly for those residential streets, to do residential fences as an option for a front yard. Number 8, add the option for rooftop signs. This came to our attention and reviewing the Bend project. As you know, there's an opportunity there to do like a 20-story building, and the idea was there, hey, if you have a major corporate tenant, could you do a rooftop sign? So that's something that's currently not really an option in the entire form-based code area. We thought it would be good to at least have that as an option in the form-based code area. So there's an option for it. It has to be, I think it's 10 stories minimum. And there's a review process that has to be approved by form-based code committee. So even though it's an option, there's still a process you need to go through to get that sign approved.
John,
yes.
let me stop you right there. So have we developed, or does the process include design standards for a sign?
Yes, it does. It does. Yes, it does. It cannot be like an LED sign or flashing. There are standards in the details of that code. Yes.
Okay, and we can find that
in that detailed write-up. Yes, sir.
Thank you. 9.
Yeah, 9 is, again, this applies specifically to the Bend context. It basically reduces those parking setbacks for B streets from 30 feet. I'm trying to, you can't see because of to 10 feet. And so that is consistent with the rest of the form-based code. I think they had put us, I think it was originally 30 feet. I think in the form-based code, again, it's 10 feet for the rest of the area. So we're just making this consistent with the rest of the form-based code area. 10 is the annual review. We did discuss this at length at Planning Commission. Councilman Ledford, you might recall about, I think that what we heard as part of that conversation is still to have an annual review. It may not have to be this formal survey process, but the idea is that we'll at least look at it annually and continually to make amendments throughout the year. So the intent of this is, again, instead of having a formal survey or waiting a year to make changes, we would continue to, just like you do with the rest of the zoning code, make changes as needed. And there still be some kind of a report, a review, presentation to PC or council as far as if there's any other changes that are needed.
Sure. It's easier to digest that smaller.
I agree. I think when you we don't want to have 28 things every year. I think that's a little much. 11 is the neighborhood review. This just clarifies that if you're doing interior building renovations, that you do not have to have a neighborhood review process. If some of y'all might remember the Patton Towers project, that required a neighborhood meeting, even though that was all interior work. So, we're trying to, again, be clear that if it's you only need to do a neighborhood meeting if you're doing exterior work on the building. 12 deals with the form-based code committee structure. And I'm gonna actually pop out and show a PDF because this might be helpful.
Hey, John, I've got city attorney has his hand raised. Can I let him jump in real quick?
Yep.
Bill?
One minor question, John. You were
Yes.
talking about residential attached and detached
Yes.
having 0% grade on there. I was
Yes.
only concerned, is any portion of the, I guess, the form-based code area going to be in a flood zone? And that was
clearly-
a little concern.
Well, that would not, clearly that doesn't change that requirement because it still has to be built above as far as, and I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll check with LDO to confirm it doesn't create a conflict.
Yeah.
But I will confirm that the floodplain requirements would preempt that.
Staying. place.
Yeah, I was just looking at our map here for form-based code after that was brought up by Councilman Mitchell on the other. And I just wanted to make sure that at least we could satisfy that because we do have properties that are close to the river and
I'll
are
make a note
very
of that.
hilly. So we need to look at that.
So floodplain and flood elevation and ground floor.
Yes, sir.
I got it. Okay. I thought this may be a good. Can you all see that screen, or I need to make it bigger?
I got it.
If you can kind of see the old and the new, and the past currently, and this has caused some issues in terms of filling open positions. The form-based code committee, as you know, it's kind of broken down into thirds. You have the first three are your architect, urban designer, landscape architect. The second three are your developer, realtor, banker, civil engineer, or contractor. And then your last three are your property owner, resident, or business owner. Originally, those top two also had one of those three had to be a person who resides, whose office is located in the form-based code area. That has created some challenges in getting somebody to check all that meets all those criteria. We're meeting the intent of having local ownership and buy-in by those last three slots. So what essentially we're proposing to do is take out that requirement that of the first 6 items, that one of those has to be also a person who resides in the form-based code area, because it's just been problematic trying to fill these positions when you have those added criteria. Any questions about that?
See no hands, John.
Okay. All right, let me go. All right, give me a second here. So now looking at, I'm on number 13. We're just changing the title, and sometimes, you know, words can mean a lot, as you all know, changing the title from neighborhood review to neighborhood input. And the reason for that is, as LDO folks will tell you, sometimes when there are meetings for with the applicant, the neighborhood is seeing that as a voting up and down. That's really not what that is. It's supposed to be an information meeting and also input, but it's not a decision-making meeting. And so we're just changing the title of that from neighborhood review to neighborhood input to be clear that I'm here to give you information and to hear feedback before I proceed forward with my permitting process, but it's not a formal approval like you would before a form-based code committee. Does anybody understand? Good on that one?
I think we all understand that.
Okay. All right. The other one, again, is changing the wording from lot frontage to building frontage. That was creating some confusion. A lot of times when we refer to lot frontage, we're thinking about lot width. And this standard actually is dealing with the percentage of the lot that has to be occupied by a building. And so we're just changing the word to building frontage to be real clear about what that means. That's how much building occupies the lot. Item number 15, that just deals with parking pads and carports. If you think about, you know, folks who have a parking pad in the front, particularly for a single family residential, that's fine, but you need to have the you know, those pads and courts going to the side or beyond the front wall plane of the house. Again, this is something that we learned through feedback from LDO staff to provide some clarity. Another item dealing with stoops. Currently, the way the standard was written, it was not clear you could have a stoop. So think of that as the steps leading up to your house. If you got a house that's right next to the right of way, you know, you want to have that stoop coming right down to the sidewalk edge, right? Well, the way the standards were written, it was not clear about that. You could even get the sidewalk to the right of way line. So this clarifies that you can have a stoop go to the right of way line as long as 0 setbacks are allowed. Okay. Had a misspelling correction, number 17, it was steeps. So changing that to stoops. Number 18, allow as the basically a 2-story option with appropriate height ranges for the urban residential detached. The 19 gives basically there's already a 3-story option in the edge, but it was basically there's no height guidance given. So we added that option for an ERD3 with the appropriate height reference. Any questions on that? Item number 20 gives basically clarifies how you measure the square footage of an accessory dwelling unit. And what I understand from talking with LDO staff on this was some folks were using exterior stairwells or trying to exclude climate controlled space as part of the 700 square feet. And what staff's trying to be clear here is whatever is climate controlled, that counts toward your ADU maximum square footage. So folks aren't, I guess the idea is not to have folks overbuild on a lot.
Got it.
Then item number 21 clarifies that when you are resurfacing a parking lot or expanding a gravel surface area, I think you remember you had an appeal recently about this situation. This makes it very clear if you're expanding your gravel or repaving that you have to comply with the landscaping requirements. Okay, item 22 is just aligning the illustration in the form-based code to match the standard. You have a standard for 1 tree per 10 spaces in the narrative, but the illustration shows 1 tree per 5. So we're just trying to make that align with that. 23 is changing the title from building signs to ground floor signs. And again, just clarifying intent that those standards apply to signs that are placed on the ground floor, not on the 2nd and 3rd floor. 24 deals with soil volume. Or in the past, we calculated soil volume strictly as the amount of grass strip, but you could actually, as you know, and stormwater folks would tell you this, they like to see it where you actually have some detention areas, impervious surface underneath the paved area. So this allows you to use any pervious surface that you have that might be underneath the parking lot to count towards your soil volume requirement. And then 25 and 26 relate specifically to the bend. 25 relates to if you want to make a minor change to those street section requirements, that gives the opportunity for staff to approve those in the bend. And then 26 also basically allows the option for an agricultural use, because currently it's not listed on the land use table for the bend. And that's everything.
Very good. John, thank you so much. I am not seeing any hands at this time. Let me scroll through just to double check. So before we move on, seeing no hands, we have one resolution in planning, item D, but I think when we're at the end of this meeting, I want to take the temperature just to have folks start thinking about it. Council members, if you would, holding off items E and F until the 25th when you return, because I'd really feel more comfortable, I would personally, to have you be able to answer those. So if you would, though, let's take us on to resolutions. Planning, item D. This is for a special exceptions permit and probably a PUD.
Yes, right. You got it. This is a request for a PUD is in that Lookout Valley area. Basically on 8 acres, proposing 42 lots for density of 5.17 dwelling units per acre. This property is located off of O'Grady Drive near the Angela Lane intersection. The Lookout Valley Elementary School is not far from this site. It's also located, let me look at my notes. I think it's called Tiftonia Heights subdivision, is right next door to this property. Yes. Again, if you look at the zoning, there is some R5. You see that kind of that darker color yellow here and here. There's R5, but the rest of the property is zoned R1. You look at the land use, you can see there's currently one single family structure on this property. You have single family detached to the north and the south and the southeast. If you look at the Lookout Valley land use plan, it recommends this area to be low density residential, which accommodates a density of up to 4 units per acre. I think it's important to note that as it's currently zoned R1, you can really get up to 5 units per acre by right. There are no steep slopes on this property. You do have some floodplain across the street to the southeast. So we, even though the the PUD by right could allow you up to do to 5, which exceeds the Lookout Valley plan's recommendations of 4. Our thought process was, because it's already zoned R1, which allows 5 dwelling units per acre, that we would recommend approval with a density cap of 5 dwelling units per acre, which basically reduces the number of lots they're building on that property by 1. And if you want to see the site plan, that's the site plan showing one point of access with the lots you see going around it. Again, just remember R5 does give you up to about 5 units per acre, by right under zoning. So at Planning Commission, there was no opposition. After hearing from the applicant and staff, Planning Commission concurred with staff's recommendation to approve with that density cap of 5 dwelling units per acre.
All right, thank you, sir. Chairman Henderson,
I do have some questions, sir.
please.
John, a couple of questions. One, I guess, even though, let's go with the staff report.
Yes, sir.
Compatibility with development form, you have yes. I'm going to disagree with that. There is nothing in Lookout Valley that looks like that plan right there.
Okay.
Nothing. The difference,
You think
these
from a
lots,
density perspective, you're thinking.
well, even from a lot standpoint, these are 40-foot lots.
Right.
I'm assuming. In an R1, the minimum is 60 foot.
Right.
How, and I get it, you can develop 5 per acre, which it would reduce it by supposedly 1 lot. But if you went with 60-foot lots in this, do we know how much it would reduce it with a 60-foot lot like our current R1 zoning is?
Not off the top of my head, but I could probably get you that answer.
I would like to know that answer because,
Okay.
again, there's nothing in Lookout Valley that looks like this as far as development form. Well, with the exception of over in the Black Creek area, and this is nowhere near the Black Creek area.
Okay.
How many letters went out notifying residents of this?
As you know, what we do is we contact the immediately adjacent property owners, and any neighborhood association who's registered on the Economic Community Development's Neighborhood Association registry. That's how we do our notices. So it would just go to the immediately abutting property owners, and then
so we don't know how many letters went out.
I can find out.
Okay,
I can find out.
I would like to know the answer to that as well.
Okay.
And tell me why a staff would check the box yes that it is compatible with the development form. I mean, what stretch of the imagination is that look like a development form in Lookout Valley?
I think what we're getting there is single family dwelling. I get what you're saying in terms of compactness. It's much different. I think we're looking at more a single family dwelling as opposed to a 2-unit or a 3-unit or a commercial type structure. I think I hear what you're saying is the nuance of the density. What I hear you saying, Councilman, is that the density is much higher than what's around it.
Well, development form to me is what does it look like compared to what everything else that looks like around it.
I got you. I hear what you're saying.
And I think, with y'all recommending or by putting yes and recommending this, it almost acts like I've been through this before with these PUDs in rural areas.
Right.
And not with favorable outcomes. So
gotcha.
I think we need to start being a little more sensitive as staff when we start recommending development forms looking like other development forms. In this case, particularly, there's no sensitive slopes areas that we need to be dealing with that we would entertain a PUD.
Right.
I mean, I see no reason for a PUD on this piece of property.
I will say this, Councilman, we actually discussed that very topic.
Okay.
And
how did we get to recommending it then?
Well, I tell you, because this is probably another, hopefully that our consultants will talk about is our PUDs have very little standards. So it's hard to, if you look at our history, unfortunately, the way we've approved PUDs in the past, right? There hasn't been a consistently applied standard as it relates to, are you really doing this to protect environmental resources? Or are you doing this just to have a more flexible development design in terms of lot widths and setbacks?
Yeah. Well, to me,
there are no standards.
This doesn't look like any development form around this area to me. And the fact that there's no sensitive slopes that we need to take a look at, I'm sitting here questioning why a PUD in this area.
Okay.
When,
Well,
when
we'll get-
when everything else is a standard R1 subdivision development.
Right.
And it just, you know, I get looking at a PUD if there are some extenuating circumstances,
Right.
but to stick a PUD in the middle of a standard R1 residential form subdivision, you know, where all the houses around it, I don't get it. And like I say, I haven't had good results when we've done this in rural areas for no other reason than we just wanted to stick a bunch of houses there.
Hey, Councilman, I just got a text from Brian. I'll follow with more formal email, but we did send out 21 letters, including the Lookout Valley Neighborhood Association. Jerry Walls was contacted, but I'll forward you those letters as an FYI.
Thank you.
Chairman,
All right.
thank you very much. Does that help you right now, sir?
Very little, but I guess it does.
I'll have
Well,
a
I mean, hey,
follow-up
I
question.
appreciate the critique, because I just want to be straightforward. That's something our staff has been wrestling with. The PUD tool, is it really working like we want it to? And I think what you're discussing is some of the frustrations we as staff have also covered. So
Well-
this is not a new concern. I think the issue, as you know, is anytime you change regulations, you know what that's about. So I'll just leave it there.
Very good. Thank you, John. Chairman, I will be following up with a question for you at the end of this meeting. I do see a hand for Councilman Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chairman Henderson, I believe doing a little bit of quick math, it takes it from 42 lots down to 28 lots if you got 60-foot frontage.
That's quite a bit of difference.
Quite a bit. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Mitchell getting us gold star and a half today. I like it.
He's on point.
Okay, so John, this brings us to the end of our meetings. We have a steep slopes and floodplains update on our agenda, but I think where we left this is we are asking for a review of the vegetation component. And I understand that is where we are at this time.
Yes, and we so we had a staff meeting about this past Friday, and what I've been working with some of the other, I know in terms of LDO, they would like some assistance and some outside expertise to sort of evaluate that language, because that's really not their training to do. And so I am in the process of working with staff to figure out what that looks like in terms of having some consultant help. And so as soon as I hear more, I'll let y'all know. But we've had that conversation. So it's a matter of figuring out where the support is going to come from.
Okay. Well, let's keep that going strong. Councilman Mitchell, is that an old or new hand, sir?
That's a new one.
Okay, you have the floor.
Thank you. I guess this is towards Councilman Henderson. We've lost steep slopes off our strategic planning agenda somehow. I don't know exactly how that happened, but I was wondering if we could get it put back on, maybe in pending legislative matters, so we can not get an opportunity to lose focus again. Is that a possibility?
Madam Clerk or Miss Lydia, let's go ahead and schedule or put that on our strategic planning agenda for, was it the 18th? I think our next one. And that way, or I'm sorry, yeah, the 18th. That way it'll keep it in front of us. Thank you, Councilman Mitchell.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, just one more comment to John. As you're looking for outside help, the more this happens in District 2, the more residents and constituents are getting involved, because it directly affects them because they live right beside some of this. I'm finding some very, very simple questions that I think would need to be addressed in the law. And it's simple questions like, during construction, is the stormwater leaving the property and going on to someone else's property because of this construction?
Yep.
The other one would be soil erosion. Is the soil erosion leaving the property that the development is on? to other people's properties. And so, simple yes, no questions like that. And if we can figure out how to handle those situations, I think that would be very helpful to have in the law if as you're working down this road.
Gotcha. And again, I would say, to my understanding is, now this is where again I would defer to my LDO peers, but they are doing that. Is my understanding they're already enforcing a lot of that as far as how you manage your construction site process. I think what the new tool is, I understand you've all asked us to look at, is that replanting set of standards that Councilman Ledford, I guess, brought to y'all's attention.
Well, that would be in the phase 3, but we're also talking about a phase 1 and a phase 2.
Yep.
And while the construction's going on, what are they doing to other people's properties by developing that piece of property? I think is hugely important to address in the new law. And I have all the confidence in the world you'll find the outside help you need to word that so that it can be effective with developers, as we know the developers that aren't doing it right. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Councilman Mitchell, and thank you for your strong support and interest in what we're doing in planning and zoning. I do appreciate your efforts. So John, that's the end of our Planning and Zoning Committee meeting today. Let me go ahead and you want to take your screen down?
Sure, yes, sir.
So I can see everybody. There we go. So I can see everything at once. Are there any, I'm going to make a suggestion that we move off items E and F until the 25th, until John is back from his Caribbean vacation.
I wish.
If you have an objection to that, please raise your hand. If not, City Attorney, Mr. Noblet, will you make sure that happens? Or I'm getting that. I'm reading your lips. So you said yes.
Yes, I will. Yes.
Okay. So items E and F will go on to our, pardon me, 25th. All other items, A, B, C, D, are we okay to move ahead with those? I don't see any objections through hands. And our last item, the resolution for the PUD, I would like to ask Chairman Henderson, are you ready to move that, allow that to stay on the agenda, sir, for next week?
Well, Mr. Attorney or Mr. Bridger may, if I understand this correctly, this was when it was heard at Planning Commission, was told that it would be heard this particular week.
Right, advertised for that, yes, sir.
Yeah, advertised. So I think at this point, we just have to address it
Okay,
on next Tuesday and go from there.
very good. So items E and F, Mr. Attorney will move to the 25th. All other items are ready to move out of committee and move forward.
Okay.
Any questions or comments before we close out and turn over the committee we've all been waiting for today under Councilman Mitchell? Then I will close us out, and please welcome Councilman Mitchell for Public Works and Transportation.
Thank you, Councilman Ledford. Can I get minute approval?
Move to approve.
All right, is anybody against approving those minutes? Raise your hand, please. So they'll stand. Thank you. We're going to start with transportation. Who do we have? Transportation. Who are we bringing up? Someone's got their hand raised.
H. Bailey, does that sound right?
Is that Blythe's brother?
That's Blythe.
Okay.
Should
Sounds good to me.
I bring him on?
Please. And while he's coming up, could you please read for today 7E?
Yes, sir. A resolution authorizing the city engineer to enter into a contract with the Cincinnati, New Orleans, and Texas Pacific Railway Company, including a one-time payment of $50,000 required to cover the risk financing fee for the construction, maintenance, and operation of a wastewater pipeline under and across the railway, and to abandon the existing wastewater pipeline by a method approved by the railway for DuPont Parkway Pump Station Collection System, W-12-026 Gravity Sewer.
See no hands. So if that's the case, we have nothing on the agenda session for next week in transportation, but we do have, looks like 3 items on future consideration. Do you have that in front of you, Mr. Bailey?
I do,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
The first one has to do with Area 3 Glass Street and Dodson Avenue Streetscape Project, enter contract with Integrated for the Glass Street and Dodson Avenue Streetscape Project, total $229,912.45. Change order for Bailey Avenue Bridge repairs, field condition change, sidewalk repair, total $10,000. And a resolution authorizing the Department of Transportation to enter an agreement with Tally Construction Company for construction services associated with Chestnut Street from West 4th Street to north of Aquarium Way, and Bailey Avenue from east of Norfolk Southern Railroad to Dodds Avenue. And of course, these have amounts attached to them also. Is there any questions on any of those 3 items for Mr. Bailey? I know we'll see these on the 2-week agenda very shortly, and you'll have another chance to ask questions at that point. Councilman Gilbert.
Yes, I just want to start talking about the Central Avenue and other streets. Can we not also talk at the same time about Lincoln Park? I know we're supposed to go back to that subject because of they have ability to do the construction of the street. Why can't we move forward with the park itself at the same time? This is around the park, correct?
Are you speaking of Lincoln Park?
Yes. Didn't y'all say Central? Did you say Central Avenue? I might have misunderstood.
I said Bailey Avenue.
Oh, Bailey Avenue. Okay. I thought you said Central.
Well, do you want him to try to answer that question anyway, even though it's not up there?
You might as well.
Can you repeat the question, Mr. Councilman?
Well, I'm just trying to make sure that when we're doing development and of the Central Street Avenue, that we start considering Lincoln Park and how that's going to fit at the same time.
I think that's going to happen. And I think when we reported, I guess that was about a month or a month and a half ago, we indicated that we were coming up on what we called a mitigation meeting. We had that mitigation meeting at the beginning of July. We're working through the draft, and the draft is not finalized until it's signed by all parties, Federal Highways included. And so I can't share too much about it, but I think it's probably fair to say that the Lincoln Park being dedicated as a public park is a part of that commitment, and it would, by definition and by the requirements of the FHWA, would happen in concert with our project.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Gilbert. Councilperson Burrs.
Blythe, just a question of clarification. When we look at these big sums of money that are being used for transportation, this stuff is already in the budget, right? And earmarked for that. And we've all known about it. It's just a matter of bringing it up because it's becoming ready to go.
Yes, ma'am. Essentially, that's correct. All 3 of the projects that Chairman Mitchell read have been in a previously approved capital budget.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Bailey, I believe you had a presentation on alleys for us today. Are you prepared to move forward with that?
Yes, sir. I also wanted to ask for clarity, two things. I'm using headphones with a microphone. Can everyone hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
A little
good.
soft, but I can hear.
All right, I'll try to speak up a little bit as I give the presentation. And the second one is, I think Ms. Lydia read an item. I did not recognize it, but just for clarification, I think the item that you read was, and maybe I'm looking at the wrong agenda, but the item I think that I heard was a Public Works item. On my agenda is item E, 7E.
I apologize.
So I
did. I read there. Both 7Es are on the same page. That page has different 7Es on it, and that's the only thing on the page. And you're absolutely right. I read the 7E for Public Works, not for transportation.
Okay, please read the 7E for today.
Yes, sir. A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Transportation to apply for and, if awarded, accept a Section 5310 Enhanced Mobility of Seniors and Individuals with Disabilities grant from the Federal Transit Administration to repair and install pedestrian infrastructure with the city's contribution not to exceed $45,000 for a total amount not to exceed $225,000.
Now I still got hands from Councilperson Gilbert and Burrs. Are those new hands?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's old.
Okay. Blythe, have you all picked out where this money is going to be used? What part of the city of Chattanooga?
No, sir, we haven't. We do have a really good process though. And I mentioned, I think at our committee, I guess it was on the 3-week, a couple of weeks ago, we've been successful at winning these same grant funds in the past. And the last time we did a departmental report, our project manager, Greg Harold, presented on the projects that we're doing with 5310. So I just wanted to bring that to your memory because it was pretty fresh. We're almost finished with all those construction projects. And the reason I say all that is that we use we get all the CARTA data that gives us all the boardings and the lightings. So we know who's coming and going from the bus, from the transit system. And we also look at the number of wheelchair uses for those locations. And when we layer that over the top of our database that says where there's most likely to be a need for pedestrians, that's how we establish the locations that we're currently working under, of which there's 10 to 15 of those locations that we're improving with the current grant. So when I shouldn't say, if we're successful in this grant and we win this funding, we would use the same process and we'd let the council know when we got to that point.
Okay, thank you. See no more hands. Okay, so can you proceed with the presentation on alleys?
Yes, sir. I'm going to take a moment and share my screen. Hopefully this will, can you see my screen, members of the council?
Yes.
Okay, good. So you had asked before we were doing these meetings by electronic screen to do a presentation on alleys. And I've compiled a fair amount of information on what CDOT does as well, what the city does as a whole on alleys, and just want to offer a few slides, and I think I can cover it in 5 to 10 minutes. Firstly, alleys are very important. They're important for a number of reasons. I consulted with Karen Hunt at the Regional Planning Agency and confirmed that there are multiple current adopted plans that actually recommend that when alleys are in existence, they should be used for vehicular access. That specific recommendation exists in lots of our adopted plans. In addition, we found that sometimes traffic can be calm on our alleys such that they can become gathering places for people and places for neighborhoods to identify with each other. So I'm going to cover 3 categories of alleys. You can see the categories on the right. These are different aspects of alleys that CDOT interacts with: maintenance and repair, alley right-of-way abandonment, and temporary use of right-of-way permit. First, I want to talk briefly about repair. Public Works has a standard operating procedure that is designed to respond to repair needs on our alleys in ways that are similar to repair needs across the city. I did coordinate and had several meetings with leadership from Citywide Services, as well as my counterpart, Mr. Holland, on the details of their procedure. We also share a workflow internally so that when we get requests for repair on all types of streets, alleys included, we have a good process for how we receive that information and prioritize it. As you all know, we get repairs all throughout the city. The ones that get done by our crews are the ones that represent the highest potential for property damage and or safety. And so if there's an urgency that suggests repair needs need to happen in alleys, the city is equipped to make those repairs. We also do really quick vegetation clipping. Overgrowth in alleys can hinder safe sight distance. And so for those kinds of issues at intersections with alleys, as well as signs, we can respond very quickly to those types of requests. I always try to encourage folks to use 311. As it relates to our repairs, you all know that we oversee the yearly paving contract, and we can't do all of the repair requests that come in with our crews. So what happens with those repair requests after they filtered through our system and have been determined to not be an immediate property hazard or safety issue, they come to us, and we every year, among other things, look through all of our service requests from citizens that come in through 311 and elsewhere. All of the requests that come in, of course, many of them come in through email, and we use those requests to figure out how to direct our paving dollars. So I would encourage folks that have requests for alley repair needs to file those in 311, because it creates a really usable and helpful database for us to use every year when we evaluate our paving list. Alley right-of-way and abandonment. That's another aspect of our work that we share with others. Let me go to the next slide. Interestingly enough, there's a policy that you all adopted that is very, very similar to one that was adopted in 1996. That was a regional planning agency policy that was also adopted by the city. There was also another one in 2005 that was adopted by the city. You can see the resolution number. And then most recently, in the fall of 2016, the current right-of-way and abandonment policy. I'm just going to quote from the purpose and intent of that policy. I've said it to you all before when we bring right-of-way abandonments to you on multiple occasions. I think it's pretty well stated. It is the purpose of the policy to retain rights-of-way for public use and only to recommend the permanent closure and abandonment of rights-of-way when it is demonstrated that the public has no further need or interest to retain the right-of-way and that its abandonment is necessary to achieve a significant private or public interest. And the way I've explained that in the past is there's basically two things we're looking for. An applicant that asks for the city to consider abandoning a right-of-way has to show, they have to demonstrate that there's no true use for that right-of-way, and they have to also show that it achieves a significant public or private interest. The rest of the policy is available on our website. I'll show you a picture of that as well. First, and then also, all of the right-of-ways that are in alleys are tracked with our city GIS folks. If you are not familiar with this web portal, I use it quite a bit. I recommend it to anyone. It's publicly available on the Chattanooga.gov website. You just go to Chattanooga.gov, and in the bottom right-hand corner, you can click on a button that allows you to access GIS, and GIS will pull up a map that you can navigate. As you zoom in close enough, you will begin to see city streets. And I've taken a snapshot of city streets in the Avondale neighborhood where there are existing alleys as well as streets. The next slide shows that if you go to the layers on the left, you can toggle onto transportation. And then if you open up the subsets of transportation, you can toggle onto right-of-ways _ alleys, which I have done in this screenshot. And you can see the colors that show up. I can't see it because the Zoom window is covering it, but I think you can see, I just moved it. So the right-hand part of my slide indicates the 4 different colors. I always have to remember where that is, and I'll just direct you. If you look and see where it says layers, left-hand side of your screen, if you follow your eye just to the right, you'll see 4 little lines that look like a left justify symbol. If you click on those 4 little lines, that's how you can turn on the layers, and it will show you what these colors mean. just a bit about those 4 classifications. And you can see in this image that there are examples of each except for temp use. I don't see a purple layer in this particular snapshot that I've taken, but the color black is for closed alleys. Closed rights of way are those that have been abandoned through city ordinance. Closed and abandoned are synonyms for each other. Orange is open. Open are rights of way which are platted and accepted by the city. Open alleys are maintained by the city. All the things that I mentioned on the previous slide, we do in those alleys. Temp use, you all are very familiar with temp use. That's a permit process that CDOT administers. And I will talk a little bit more about that on a few slides later. And lastly, unopened alleys are designated by plat only, and they have not been formally accepted by the city. These alleys are not maintained by the city, but they are available for use by permit, and developers or homeowners may improve them just like they can city streets for acceptance by the city. So I'll go to the next slide. I'll move my Zoom window out of the way. The process for right-of-way abandonment starts with CDOT. We have a pre-application period where we review and interact with the applicant on the subsequent mandatory referral process. Mandatory referral, I always try to research that. It's not really written specifically, that term, but mandatory referral is generally perceived to be a reflection of the state law that makes it mandatory for the Planning Commission to make a referral on all changes to city streets, like when they are abandoned. So that's why we call it mandatory referral. The pre-application by CDOT is followed by an application to the Regional Planning Agency, and I've taken a snapshot of some of these slides that you all have seen before. The Planning Agency reviews the request for mandatory referral and street right-of-way. I've just taken a sample from a right-of-way abandonment that we processed in 2020. As well as a map that's created and provided by the Regional Planning Agency. And then that case is heard publicly at the Planning Commission meeting and recommendation is made. Then it comes back to CDOT, and CDOT puts together the application materials for the City Council, which you all are familiar with. One of the things that we've done a few years ago, we developed some of these systems, is sometimes applicants think that they need a right-of-way abandonment. And because the policy really discourages permanent abandonment, because then we have rights of way that we used to be available to us but are no longer available. We sometimes are able to say, if you tried temporary use or if you tried something else, it would prevent us from having to permanently abandon rights of way, and then they're no longer usable by the public at all. So our pre-application process has been very helpful, so that when we have brought these cases forward to City Council, we feel like there are either alternatives that are being proposed that provide the equivalent level of value to the city as the abandoned right-of-way that's being applied for, or the applicant has clearly demonstrated that the existing right-of-way doesn't have any future use, either because of topography, or it dead ends into a creek, or some other aspect like that. All of the information is available on our website. If you go to transportation operations, you can see 2/3 of the way from the bottom, the right-of-way abandonment and closure, which also has a link for the policy and a number of other pieces of information. Lastly, temporary use of right-of-way permit is a permit process. I think I wanted to, give me a second. I wanted to talk about our temporary use process. And you can also see that it's available on our website. We have a number of different things that we use the temporary use for. And you all remember when we used to bring these to City Council, there are building projections, signs, sidewalk cafes, banners, and the topic of this presentation, alleys and unopened rights of way. We have a specific type of temporary use permit that we use for these types of requests. We almost always only consider temporary use for alleys and unopened rights of way when the applicant can when the applicant is not planning to obstruct anything. So we require that after the improvement, the existing right-of-way has to be usable by the general public. So the most frequent use of this temp use type is when there's an unopened alley and a homeowner wants to build a garage off of that alley, or a developer wants to build a garage for a house that they're building. They can apply to us to have those alleys improved, and they improve them at their cost. That does not put any maintenance burden on the city, but it allows the right-of-way to be used by somebody to access their home, again, in a way, as I mentioned in the first slide, that is oftentimes recommended in neighborhoods where those platted rights-of-way already exist. In rare circumstances, we will consider a temporary use for an obstruction. In general, we don't consider those, but there have been situations where littering or dumping is happening, or bad things are happening on an alley. In both of these cases, when the alley, when it's finished, will be open to the public, we require notification of property owners that abut the location of the right-of-way proposed to be improved. When someone wants to obstruct the alley, we require notification of all of the property owners along that entire block to make sure that whatever it is that we grant in terms of a permit is agreeable by those other neighbors. One thing about the temporary use permit that's embedded in the language, and Attorney Noblet helped us with several years ago, is the city does have the right to revoke those permits. By definition, our rights of way are intended for the public. So if at such time we determine that there are conflicting uses that can't both be accommodated, we can't have that. So we'd have to revoke a permit. We don't have to do that very often, but we have to do it before. And again, our alleys are assets to everybody. They're usable by the general public, and we think they're very valuable to the city. So with that, those are the three categories of right-of-way / alleys that I wanted to cover today, and I'll be happy to take questions.
I see a question from Councilman Ledford. You're muted. You're muted, Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hey, Blythe, if an alleyway is determined, what's the process for getting an alleyway, I guess, usable again? If you have identified one and it's just completely overgrown, I know that happens a lot. What's the step for a Chattanooga resident to go through the process of gaining access to the alley again?
There's two ways to do it, and it depends on what the interest of the resident is. The temporary use process, which is the last permit that I covered, is pretty usable by anybody because it does not have design requirements. You're not required to build to a city standard. And it basically gives you the right to work in the alley as long as I mentioned, as long as it can be used by the general public after you're finished. That's probably if you're talking about a single resident, that's probably the answer to the question. If you're a developer or someone that is planning on making a significant investment, just like a developer on a large lot who's building roads, they would be responsible for building a street to a city standard for acceptance by the city. And once it's accepted by the city, it becomes open and maintained.
So if a alleyway is identified, but it's overgrown and a property owner desires to gain access to the property, or that may be the only access to the property, what steps does the city of Chattanooga take in order to clear that alleyway? Does it go as far as removing vegetation? Does it go as far as making the pavement to some sort of usable condition? Can you walk me through the steps of what happens if someone comes to you with an alleyway that's just completely overgrown that you may not even know it's there, but would like to open it?
Yeah, sure. I went back to this screen because it's most likely that the alley that you were describing is unopened. And if it's unopened, that means the city has never taken responsibility for it. It was platted when the area was platted. Most of the areas that have alleys platted were prior to the 1960s. So the city does not take responsibility for those. We would have significant burden if we did. So that's most likely the case. However, if that's why I do think it's helpful for citizens to have, everybody, this is publicly accessible, this website, to search for GIS. So you can go to your location and you can toggle on and find out if it's an orange alley, it's open. And if it's a blue alley, it's unopened. If it's orange and it is the way that you described it, Councilman, that means that we are responsible for it. So we should be willing to go clear it and make repairs as needed.
Very good. So use GIS.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. We have Councilman Burke.
Hey, thank you, Chair. Blythe, we've had, definitely appreciate the presentation. We've had several conversations about these alleys. People in District 8 have an issue when they have to maintain the alley. And they're saying, hey, it takes an act of Congress for me to even get vegetation clipped and pulled back off my property. And so if I have to maintain and clip the property or clip the alley, why don't the city just turn the alley over to me and I take care of it and maintain it and it become my piece of land? Then some of the alleys that are not overgrown, people in District 8 have an issue with having to put rocks down because they drive back and forth. And you know the situation I have over on Riverside Drive where the alley is supposed to be 10 feet wide. One person on one side of the alley saying the alley is only 4 feet wide or 6 feet wide. And the other people on this side is saying it's supposed to be 10 feet wide. It's been this way the whole time. And we had several people go out there and it still was an issue determining how wide our alley is. And it just seemed like it should be a better system that we should say, okay, all of our alleys or these alleys are this wide. This is city property. This is the city's right of way. This is our area. And your property stops here and the city property start here. And it just seemed like we don't have that accessibility. It's almost like, well, I don't know, maybe at least they can get through it. They can come through it. And I just rather see, I want to see a presentation that says, if this is our alleys are 10 feet wide, or if it's something we have to do in so many feet long, this is how our alleys are set up. And this is what is ours. And I would like to see a better way to where constituents, when they call in, it doesn't take an act of Congress to get things done. Because a lot of people get very frustrated because they have to do the work themselves, use their time, use their dollars, and then they're told, well, we can't give you the alley because we may use it for development or for a thorough through one day, so we can't relinquish the alley, but we're not going to maintain it. How do we get that fixed and do a better system? Going to the website, looking at the layout that you have here is amazing. But still the system is broken because in District 8, I still get a lot of complaints when it comes to these alleyways.
Well, I thought you might ask all those questions, Councilman. And I think the last one, I struggle the most with the one that you said where our policy says we shouldn't recommend permanent closure if you can't demonstrate there's not a future use. And that's, when that has happened in your district, it's happened in other districts. And then we say, so we're not recommending abandonment. And then the constituent says, well, if you won't let us abandon it and have it our own, then you should maintain it.
Right.
I think the best answer I can provide to you is that our system should work in a way that does provide the maintenance that's needed.
Mm-hmm.
So I will say in that case, and I'm thinking of one that happened earlier in the year. I've not talked to you about that one since then, but I'd be happy to look at it myself. You know that the other one that you were interested in, where there was a dispute over the width, you know how much effort I put into it. So I hope at the very least that reflects that I take your question seriously because these alleys are important to us. So I'm not going to say that 100% of the time we do it right, but I think it shouldn't be. I don't think that it's a broken system across the board. I'm sure there are times when there are issues that we could do better. But I think most of the time to sort of button that up, I think if it's an open alley and there are vegetation issues that are causing safety hazards, the city should be able to maintain that. And I think we do. There may be other complications, and I'll be happy to get involved if there are things that I can go look at specifically.
Let me ask you, is it a point of creating some type of ordinance or creating some type of language that we as this body can put into your process to say, hey, this is how the city of Chattanooga, does that give you a better leg to stay on? I know a lot of times, say like the situation in Riverside Drive, it seems like sometimes we don't want to say like, hey, this is what it's going to be and welcome the lawsuit, or to say like, hey, so we can get to the bottom of it, or to just say, hey, we can work it out to where, hey, you just use this part and you can get by and this way can happen. And then people still feel like they're infringed on, whether it's with vegetation or whether it's someone that's taking over the alley and we can't find our lines. What tools can we use to make this system as perfect as possible so that we don't have these disagreements when it comes to the constituents in Chattanooga?
Well, there's two issues, I think, in the question you just asked. The first one is the property dispute issue that you and I have talked about, and Councilman Gilbert as well has taken an interest in. And what I said then, I believe is true. And since Attorney Noblet is here, he can verify or not, is that the city we don't have surveyors that can stamp surveys. So ultimately, when it comes to land disputes, the city doesn't have any land dispute between any two property owners, whether their property abuts up against each other or whether their properties abut up against a public right of way. In order to settle a dispute, that becomes a civil issue that they have to rely on surveyors. And as you know, we did the best we could to try to resolve the issue in that particular case. And I'll do it again. I think anytime we can do something that avoids two citizens suing each other and everybody can be happy, we'll do that. But I don't know that there's a policy that I can put out to help with that particular issue. As it relates to the vegetation, I did consult with Mr. Holland on their standard operating procedure, and he said it was available for review. So I don't know if that helps, but how they maintain vegetation is written down. And if that would be helpful to you in terms of dealing with that kind of issue, I'd be happy to check with him again and see how to share that policy with you so you could see it. And then for stuff that we oversee, and I think it's the same with any department, but I know it well for our department. We try to put everything on our website. So the hard part isn't having something written down. Usually the hard part is knowing where it is, because we have lots of different things that we do and lots of different ways that we define how we do it. But anytime you ask or a citizen asks, can you clarify what the city does or doesn't do? I always try to find something that we've got written down to help with that.
And all I ask is, here in the near future, I would like, you and Justin have been tremendously great help when it comes to getting things done. But at the end of the whole process, it's kind of still open-ended, like it's still not done. But people kind of just calm down and go away. And then later on, it's going to fall in somebody else's lap. What I would like to see is that although we may not have a system set up now and the rules that are written down now, just because it's written down doesn't mean it's true or doesn't mean it's factual. It means that this is a system that worked at one time and maybe needs to be changed. And I would just like to know, how do we as this body, or you and Justin or somebody, go about changing what's written down now to give our constituents a little more security when it comes to these open alleyways or closed alleyways? That's probably the end of my situation. I just want to see how we can get to that to give them more understanding of what we're doing, because it's just not good right now. And that's all.
At the risk of jumping into something I don't need to here, I will give you a little information on this, Councilman. What you are dealing with here is the historical development and evolution of our city over a number of years. And the design patterns that were created back in the 20s and 30s may not be the same design patterns you want now. You look at each time that there is a subdivision plat that is approved But those subdivision plats go to the regional planning agency and not to this body for the development of those plans. Whenever a subdivision plat is developed, then there has to be some process for, at least on the city's end of it here, accepting those right-of-way patterns that are established in that subdivision plat. And that seems to be the issue that you've got here regarding alleys all over the city, whether there's ever been any acceptance of those plans that were created initially to keep those up, and then the money, as far as the city goes, to continue maintaining the alleyways that have been created over the years. And that issue comes to y'all if you want to get into creating a larger and larger budget for alleyways, but you have to sort of define where your money can go and what areas you can afford to maintain and which ones you can't. If you've never accepted them as right-of-ways, that's what he's referring to as unopened right-of-ways on his map. Because there's no provision where the council has actually accepted that, or the former government that was in effect here in Chattanooga has done that over the last 50 or 60 years. So that's where it becomes confusing, especially when someone who is adjoining property owners are trying to get something maintained in an area they can't agree with their neighbors that are going through there, and it's a pretty close confined space. If there's no longer a need, then those alleyways can be closed, but Blythe is indicating that it's a concern about doing that because you may have a need for connectivity in some of these areas, and that may be the only way that people can actually park their cars sometimes in the areas. If there's no longer a reason for that, then they can be abandoned, but it has to come back before you guys do that after a mandatory referral to the Planning Commission.
And thank you, Phil, for the update. And I truly understand that. And historically, things have been done wrong for a long time when it comes to so many things, you know, and historically we have had some great wins. So right now, I think in 2020, we need to look at a good win we can use to put this thing to bed, because you used the word confusing several times in your spiel, and I respect it, but just that word confusing when it comes to the city business can cause a lot of issues. So I would like to remove that confusing word and you know, give the community some assurities and say that this is how it is and this is how it's going to be done. It's going to get ugly, but we need to do that to put this thing to bed. So thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Councilman. Anyone else have any questions of Mr. Bailey and alleys? Or any questions from Mr. Bailey? Not about alleys.
Mr. Chairman, may I add one
Sure.
thing? I don't think it will take long, but it was in my notes and I went right past it. One of the things that we struggle with is when we don't recommend rights of way be abandoned. It's sometimes hard to understand what the future use is. And it's hard to advocate for a future use because there's no citizen that shows up and says, I'm going to need that in 5 or 10 years. And so in preparation for this, I was just trying to think through where are some examples of places where maybe somebody might have thought that alley wasn't worthwhile where it proved to be. This coming year, there's going to be some major construction on the highway system near where it splits off to go to Highway 27 and I-24 towards Nashville and Birmingham. And TDOT plans to fully close the Riverwalk because they have to, because they're doing some major hazardous work up above the Riverwalk section. We worked with them and identified an alley that was otherwise underused, that was still available for the city to use, that could be modified so that it can be an alternative route for the Riverwalk, so that to keep that Riverwalk traffic from having to use major high volume streets. And I felt like that was a really good example of how our rights of way that on any given day, folks might not think about and might not realize how valuable they are, that one day they can become very valuable for things like that. I wanted to point that out as a testament to why I think it's so important that we oversee this program the way that we do.
Okay, Councilman Gilbert.
Thank you, Chair. Blythe, where are we at with Bonnie Oaks and also Shalford Road? What I mean by Bonnie Oaks is where the state's supposed to be widening for the last 15 years and nothing happened yet.
I'll have to, I can get an update on both, Councilman. I don't have an update fresh for either of them. The Shalford Road project they're both federally funded. The Shalford Road project is managed by CDOT as a local programs project, so it's managed through TDOT, but it's our project. We are still in the NEPA phase and will be for a while. The NEPA phase is the first phase of the project. It's the environmental phase where you're required to do all your preliminary analysis to make sure that you're okay to go to the design phase. That's where we are on the Shalford Road project, but I can get you a more detailed update and happy to do that. The Bonnie Oaks project, of course, is being managed by TDOT. I know they've hit some snags with a couple of things, and we have a bi-monthly meeting with them. We typically ask them about that project, and I think at one point they decided to reverse the sequencing of how they were going to implement that project, but we've got a meeting. Our bi-monthly meeting is with them in 2 weeks, so I'll put that on the agenda and find out where the project is.
Thank you, sir. And what you just said, they can reverse it instead of going the way it was going for us, cause the bridges is causing a problem. Start the other end and then go to the bridge later on.
I think they were considering that. I'll have to verify that, but I'll do that when we have our meeting coming up here in a couple of weeks.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councilman. Any more questions, Mr. Bailey, before we move on to Public Works? Thank you, Blythe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we're going to go to Public Works. Who's out there? Oh, can you take your screen down, Blythe? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sir.
Have anybody raising their hands for Public Works?
Mr. Holland is.
Hi, good afternoon, council.
Okay, we're going to start. Looks like we don't have anything this week, at least on my page, for Public Works and Transportation. But we do have 3 resolutions next week. Would you please, well, you've already read 7A once, haven't you?
I have.
Okay, any questions on that? Okay, please, let's move on to 7F.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Public Works to enter into a 1-year agreement with ADS LLC for flow monitoring and rain gauge services as per the signed contract dated September 29th, 2017, with 2 1-year renewal options remaining for an amount not to exceed $1,260,000.
All right, I don't see any hands. How about G?
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Public Works to execute the consent to assignment of all purchase orders for vendor number 866306, ENCO Utility Services to ENCO Tennessee LLC, relative to the following purchase orders. 1, PO 553122 sewer billing services, and 2, PO 556369 customer refunds in conjunction with the sewer billing service.
All right, I don't see any of that. So that does it for the 2-week agenda, but we do have 3 items out here for future consideration. And that one's an ordinance amending City Code Part 2, Chapter 31, Article 8, Division 2, Section 31-314D, relative to stormwater control measures inspector certification. Due to the cancellation of certification courses from the 2020 pandemic, the deadline for certification shall be changed from 1/1/21 to 7/1/21. Then we also have an Avondale YFD Center landscape project awarding the contract. And again, these will be on a 2-week agenda at some point very shortly. And then Avondale YFD Center change order number 3, contractor JJ Contractors Incorporated of Chattanooga, increasing the amount with a contingency amount of $10,000. Anybody have any? Couple of those are having to do with Avondale. Anyone have any questions on those? Looks like Councilman Henderson first, then Councilman Byrd.
Justin, I think we had talked a little bit about that, some of these change orders and what it consisted of at some point, and it can be when it gets on the 2-week agenda. I would like a pretty thorough explanation of those.
Yes, sir. I can briefly describe that this contains change request forms 25 through 34. Also includes the payment. This authorizes the payment to the contractor for the bleachers, which was an amount of $52,000 previously approved by the council. There's also a requirement for an ADA parking spaces of $50,000. We had to add, or we added the ADA compliant parking to J&J's contract for the amount of $50,000. There's no additional funding. This was funding that was previously authorized, but this does authorize us to make a payment to the contractor. There's a few other items that we can mention, but they were all part of the construction that's already been completed at Avondale.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilman Byrd.
Thank you, Chair. Justin, would this have anything to do with, the situation has been kind of bittersweet, the building being so close to Wilcox Boulevard, one of the most dangerous streets in our community. And unfortunately, we had a car that was stolen, and a young man ran the car into another car and then hit the front of the building. Does this have anything to do with replacing the bollards out in front of the building to help prevent cars from running into it? And does this have anything to do with the damage that was done to the building due to the car hitting it?
So this does involve replacement of and repair of the existing structure and bollards that were already there. It does not include additional bollards. Those are things that our transportation department would put forth for design, but we are making the modifications for the repair. As I said, it involves a few other items that were necessary for the construction, such as a waterproof membrane for the gym,
right,
and a few construction adjustments as we were walking through the construction of the project.
All right, thank you so much, Justin.
You're welcome. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Councilman Henderson, your hand is up. Is that new or old? Okay, anybody have any other questions for Mr. Holland before we recess until 6 o'clock?
I do.
Councilman Gilbert.
Thank you, Chair. Going back what Councilman Byrd was saying about change from the way we used to do things. And I know that the weather inside the city of Chattanooga has changed quite a bit. When I was a kid, we never heard of a tornado coming hitting this area. Right now, 2011, 2020, we had a tornado here. We got different heavy rains coming to this area. I'm getting a lot of calls about flooding. And I think that we need to start looking at that more closely, because even though I know vegetarian needs to be inside some of these ditches, but when you got thick vegetarian and when you have debris, trash mixed with that, it gets blocked and then it starts flooding. I remember when we started water quality, I asked a question to Lee Norris, if we do water quality, will that cover cleaning these ditches out? He said yes. But since then, I think that yes went to, no, we're not doing it anymore. So we need to sort of reevaluating that. And I think that if we can have a educational meeting of what can we do to start preventing some of this flooding in certain areas, I would like to see that.
I can do that,
Yes,
sir.
Roy.
We still do clean ditches. I'm happy to put together a presentation that demonstrates all of the services that the water quality fee helps our residents with. We have flooding issues that arise all the time, and our team evaluates those and cleans structures daily. So we do that consistently, and are happy to brief you again on what those services look like, and if there's ever any complaints, we're happy to take those. There are some larger problems that take more complicated. The more complicated the problem, the more complicated the solution, and oftentimes the more funding needs to be applied. And we can talk about specific problems if you'd like to. I know that you and I have talked about, as well as I've talked with each of the council persons about flooding issues in their districts. And I don't think that they go away because of just the additional development causes additional impervious areas. So we have additional flooding problems, and debris will always block structures. I think we do a good job of getting out and responding to people. We know where we have flood prone areas that we respond to regularly, but I'm happy to, again, address the council with a broader presentation about all the things that we've done and all the things that we can do.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Attorney Noblet, I see your hand.
Just briefly, Justin, do you want to give them the good news about the utility training, or do you want me to on here? We had made at y'all's request just a little communication with the comptroller's office. Jeff Rose has actually done that regarding what types of training you would need to complete on behalf of the utility that we operate our sewer system for the city. And there's a state law requirement that you have certain training. The good news is that you have until you are reelected in March of 2021 to decide on that. And then you have a 1-year time period after reelection to complete that training. But MTAS will actually work with you to provide that training. So the good news is during this term, you're okay. Next term, you have to worry about it.
Well, thank you for that.
Yes, sir.
One more thing to worry about. Okay. Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Chairman. Hey, Justin, can you put together kind of a one-pager cliff notes on our water quality fee, how it is structured, why it, how it operates, and what impacts it, so that I can help hand out to a lot of constituents actually who ask me, what is the fee? Why is it so much? And how it's constructed, and some information on that would be very helpful. A one-pager cliff notes would be probably. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Chairman Henderson. Oh, wait, did you lower your hand?
Well, Councilman Ledford brought up something that if you remember, we were going to do a study on having a tiered stormwater fee, and it triggered that thought in my mind. Justin, where are we on that?
Let me circle back with it, and I'll be happy to pull a presentation together. Give me about a week or two, and I will check with the chairman on an appropriate time that we can present to you all of those, a response to all of those, and also probably pull that one pager together, Councilman Ledford, to join to use with the presentation, so you'll have that fresh and have something to take away.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Councilman Gilbert.
Chair, can we add to that? I know we discussed a few minutes ago, but we never put a date and time on having that meeting. We come to refer to flooding.
Yeah. I'll get with Mr. Holland, and we'll set meeting dates for all those.
I appreciate it, Chair.
Thank you. Anything
Nope.
else?
We'll shoot for our next committee meeting if it works for you, Councilman Mitchell, with your schedule. And if that does not, we can push it to the following committee meeting.
All right. Now, you talking about the flooding, or are you talking about everything?
I think we can talk about all of it at one time.
Okay. Well, we'll give it a shot. That's for sure. Anything else from Mr. Holland? If not, Mr. Chair, are we adjourned till 6 o'clock?
Yes, sir, we are.
We'll see you then.
Thank
Good
you.
night, everybody.